Welcome to the Arts and Oddities podcast with A.M. Hall, starring A.M. Hall. Now, here is A.M. Hall.
Welcome to Art and Oddities with A.M. Hall, where I talk about anything that strikes my fancy, to include all kinds of creative works, from children's cartoons to underground zines, to identity politics and everything in between. My guests and I will discuss how art impacts and reflects culture and counterculture, enables individualism and conformity, and have loads of fun along the way. I am your host, A.M. Hall, aka Anthony Bonafini, aka Galena Storm, aka Aquaces Mancuso. This episode, I discuss why, no matter how beautiful it is, you shouldn't put your bedroom in your kitchen. Then I sit down with returning guest, local writer Jen Donahue, to talk about her local library and the writing group she hosts there. As an aside, if you enjoy listening to the podcast, please support my Patreon at patreon.com/panicbedlam. That's PANIKBEDLAM. Panic and I are looking to get some better quality microphones and make the entire podcast just sound all around better. But we can't do it without your help. In the film that I've been working on lately, it's all I've been working on lately, so it's all I've been talking about. We are finally getting to film Scene 5 and Scene 1, both of which take place in Venus's bedroom, Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. And since they take place in her bedroom, her room needs to be just as beautiful and lovely as the goddess Venus. Unfortunately, our filming space, which is our apartment, is not beautiful or lovely, so we had to make some modifications to the room in order to make it into a appropriate set. So what we ended up doing was we moved our guest bed into the kitchen and hung some PVC pipes from the ceiling and wrapped them up in fabric, so the bed looks like a 4-poster bed now, and every single space, every single surface, every single wall of my entire kitchen is covered in cloth. Whether it's tapestries or blankets or curtains, it's covered in some sort of luxuriant surface to make it feel wonderful. Unfortunately, it's also my kitchen, and it has to stay that way for a while. It has to stay this way for a while until we finish filming in this particular set. So, our actress has also been staying with us. So, our actress Robin, who is playing Venus, is currently staying in Venus's bedroom, and she just loves it. Apparently, it's just a wonderful place to just sit and be. We made this into a lovely space. Unfortunately, it's also my kitchen, so there are curtains in the way of basic amenities, like my refrigerator, and we've had to do some moving things around. Right now, all the cloth, the tapestries are pulled back in such a way so as not to be a fire hazard over the stove, and we're trying to be very careful not to leave the stove unattended at any moment. But other than that, I can't really complain too much because the set is so beautiful. It really, really is. Unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot of space to actually use the kitchen as a kitchen, and that is just an unfortunate side effect of living in a tiny apartment and trying to film in a tiny apartment. I can't really complain too much. It's just so gorgeous. I can't. I'm looking at it right now from the other room, and it's just so beautiful with peacock feathers and stuff. I cannot wait to see this on camera. I really can't. And I really hope you get a chance to see it too. It's so beautiful. Like I said, our actress Robin, who plays Venus, has been staying with us over this past weekend while we were filming, and she actually has been sleeping in the bed that is Venus's bed because it's our guest bed that we have moved into the kitchen. And while she was staying with us, I was furiously finishing her costume, which fortunately was fairly simple, but I barely got it done in time. We had to make some last-minute tweaks to it, which I think turned out for the better. And we also had to finalize her makeup design, which I'm definitely going to be sharing this film with my stage makeup teachers. I took stage makeup in college because I was a theater minor. Yeah, I really feel like there's a certain fantasy element to Venus's makeup and her costume and her set. It has an otherworldly quality to it, and I'm just so pleased with how it turned out. And I'm so pleased with the way Venus looks compared to the way her two children look on camera, her Cupid and Hermaphroditos, who both do resemble their mother quite a bit. When I grow up, I want my bedroom to look like that. Yeah, that's so gorgeous. And I guess the moral of the story is, know your aesthetic. I can't stop looking at the room and smiling, I really can't. It's so gorgeous. But try not to have your bedroom in your kitchen, because that's a pain in the butt. Alright, stay tuned for the rest of the show. I would like to welcome back to the show local writer Jen Donahue. How are you doing today, Jen?
Good, thanks for having me back.
I understand you run a local writing group.
I do, at the local library.
The local library where you work.
Exactly.
All right. Tell me about this writing group. How long has it been around?
It's been around for, I want to say, around 3 years, which seems like a very long time indeed.
Did you start it up?
I did start it.
What were your reasons for starting up a group?
Essentially, I wanted a writing group, and we had just gotten a new director at the library who was letting more employees who were just clerks, because I am just a library clerk, run programs. And I said, hey, I think that there are a lot of local writers. I think that there's a need in the community for this sort of thing. And plus, I personally really want it. So, hey, can I run a writing group? And she said, yeah, sure, that sounds great.
That sounds pretty straightforward.
It was.
And how has this writing group influenced you as a writer?
I think it has really helped me keep writing consistently, because I'm very good at starting stories and not necessarily very good at finishing stories.
Okay, that's a problem I run into.
Yes. Yes, I have. I don't want to say thousands. I have hundreds of files on my computer that are sometimes actually a title, which is unique for me, or, you know, a phrase that I then open and contains a couple paragraphs, and I think, oh, this is great, I wonder where I was going, but I don't know where I was going.
I actually have a short story to share about your writing group that's actually kind of embarrassing.
To who?
To me.
Okay.
To me.
Okay, that's fine. Continue then.
So, Evie encouraged me to attend your writing group because I do occasionally do some writing. The two of us showed up there, and I was just so intimidated by all of the people in this group.
Oh no.
That I just sat there in silence for the entire length of, how long did it meet? An hour or two?
2 hours.
2 hours. I just sat there in silence for the entire 2 hours while everyone else shared their little stories that they had written. I'm sitting here like, meep!
Oh no. Well, I'm sorry that happened, because I try to be very welcoming, but I'm not necessarily the most welcoming person inherently.
Well, it's not that you were not welcoming, it was just a super intimidating place for an introvert like me to be.
That's fair too.
Okay, so is it necessary for writers to get past this hermitage and go to public places, or is it okay to sort of be a recluse and sort of just sit in your cave and do some writing based on what you know?
I think there's room for both.
Okay.
I think it is very important, maybe even as you're starting, to be reclusive and be in your cave and write what you know. But then there's a point at which you need to get out there. You need to share your work. You need to hear other people's work. You need to just talk about writing in general.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes you just bump into the edges of what you know, and that can be very frustrating. So I think there's a point at which, instead of just kind of talking, shouting, or whispering into the void, you need to start making actual connections.
Are there exercises that a person could do by oneself to become a better writer?
There are a lot of things just online that you can do, because a lot of the active writing that we do in the writing group is prompt based. You know, I'll have, you know, a little idea that I say, okay, you know, for the next 10 minutes, how about you write about what's on the radio? And then you go. I don't necessarily say, you know, it has to be this kind of situation. Some prompts are a lot more involved like that, but I sometimes just, the very most basic of story seeds.
I remember one of the prompts from the one time I went to your group was, you could eat it off the floor. And I wrote this story that was like 3 or 4 sentences long. It was, the floor was so clean you could eat off of it. Why would I want to do that? Well, you don't have to, you just could. Oh. And that was it. That was the entire story.
Oh. And I remember that prompt, and I don't remember what I wrote for it, which is funny. Sometimes I will, but...
I remember what some of the other writers in the group wrote. Like, there was one where someone had dropped some cat food and said, okay, cat, you can eat it off the floor. And someone else threw the food at an abusive husband and said, eat it off the floor.
Yes, I remember that story.
That was a good one. That, I think, is what we get out of a writing group, is hearing all of these different perspectives on the same...
Yes, the same idea often branches into so many different things, because there are the choices that you make, which are different from the choices other writers make, and everybody's writing from their experience. So there's just infinitely branching things that come from it sometimes.
You get the same people most weeks, don't you?
I do get a lot of the same people.
And how well have you gotten to know these people based on what they write?
I feel like I've gotten to know them pretty well, and I think a lot of the people, even if they don't write other than in the group, have written enough in the group and gotten into that kind of practice of writing that they are really developing recognizable voice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I won't necessarily say, blindfolded I could pick out everybody's stories from one another, but I feel like I would have a general idea of, maybe this came from this person, or maybe this came from this other person.
Do you get anything else out of the group, or...?
Other than a mercenary ability to write while I'm working? I mean, that's a lot to get out of a group, really.
I suppose it is, yeah. Before we started recording, you told me a rather interesting story about your experience working at the library. Can you tell me that story again?
Years ago, I considered getting a library degree, because right now my degree, I only have a bachelor's in psychology, and to be considered a real librarian, you need a master's in library science, which I don't have. And I considered getting, and then thought, oh, I don't care very much about cataloging, especially not enough to pay people a bunch of money to sit through a really boring class about cataloging. Well, that's when I worked mostly at the library front desk. Now I work upstairs in the library, physically at my library, in the department that would be considered tech services, and I order the books, and I will fix spine labels when they come in, and an actual knowledge of cataloging would be interesting and very useful now in these cases.
Sure, it would be. A lot of my family members, including my mother, are actually librarians. And I always had it in the back of my mind that I would grow up to be a librarian.
Me too.
Even when, I was a kid and they would ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would answer something different every time. I always had it in the back of my head I was going to be a librarian, because I felt like that was the one thing that I knew. But then they did that thing where, they're not hiring librarians anymore.
Yes, yeah, it is one of those things that gets cut when budgets get cut, libraries.
Yeah, so maybe it is beneficial that you don't have that degree, because if you went out and got one, and you were currently working at the library, they might decide to let you go.
It is possible. That's the potential. You either have potential for a raise, or the potential to be let go so they can hire somebody less experienced and pay them less.
Yeah, pretty much. To do the grunt work that they have clerks such as yourself do.
Yes. I don't feel that way about my particular library, but I'm sure libraries in the world exist like this.
One of the other things you do is, I don't know if this is just something that you attend or if it's something that you help run, but I have heard you tell one of your stories at an open mic night.
That's just something I attend. I don't even attend it very much, but I don't help run it.
Okay, I did hear one of your stories there. I don't remember the plot or anything like that, but I do remember some very specific details. There was someone who had some kind of illness, and this person took some foxglove.
Yes.
Which I immediately took out my phone and looked up to find out that it was for heart conditions. Little details like that. Is that something you look up, or is that something you just draw from your encyclopedia knowledge?
A little bit of both. There are times I am writing towards some manner of goal and I have to do a lot of research for. And there are other times I think, well, I learned about Foxglove from this X-Files episode that I watched when it first aired, when I was technically too young to be watching the X-Files. I really want to use this somewhere. So I really love being able to use details I already know, and definitely construct stories around them sometimes.
Okay. I think that story also had some sort of World Fair event and some sort of clockwork gin.
Yes, it was a steampunk story that is on my blog, actually.
Pitch your blog for the audience.
authorizedmusings.blogspot.com, and the title of the story is Clara and the Clockwork Gin.
All right.
And it is a story I considered serializing as a maybe novella. I don't know what happens later, so I don't know how long it would be.
Okay. At that same writing group, Evie also did some reading there, but Evie got very nervous, and one of the things that happened there was after Evie's nervous stammering up on the podium, the people would come up to her and say, "Oh, it's okay. The people are here to love you." And that actually really pissed her off.
Yeah, that's a little weird to say to a person.
Well, a super supportive group would help, but when you're reading your stories for someone, it's better to be liked for reasons, as opposed to just be liked.
Yes. Because you can't really say, oh, we're going to love it, because you really don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
What you can say is, we're not going to judge you for it.
But that would have been a better thing for people to say at an open mic reading, I think.
Yes. Yeah, we're not here to judge you, we're here to experience the readings.
So, how does a person foster good writing habits? I tell you what I've actually had a problem with, and I've shared it with my podcast listeners before, is that I have a problem with actually sitting down to write. Like, I'll make the decision, and then it just won't happen.
Yes, that is very hard. I know that there are people in the world who get up hours before they have to be to work, and they get themselves all ready, and they sit down with their coffee, and they get their notebooks all arranged, and that is their precious writing time, which isn't what I do. But if that's what works for you, I think that's really important, because what you need to do is acknowledge that writing to you is important, and that the time that you spend writing is very important, and you need to defend that in your life, even if you're defending it from yourself. Sometimes you're choosing between, oh, I could write, or oh, I could watch this movie. Sometimes you can do both, if you can listen while writing. And other times you need to say, no, I need to devote my time to my craft. This is important to me. It won't happen if I don't do it.
And that's true of any craft, not just writing. In the past, I have written a lot of fic, a lot of fan fiction. How important is it that I actually post some of that and get feedback, or is it just something that it's okay if I just write some of this and then just put it aside, like leave it on my computer for all eternity until the computer dies?
I guess it depends, because there are people who have built writing careers on fan fiction that they then filed the serial numbers off and made it something that's entirely its own. 50 Shades comes to mind, which is not to my taste, but I can really respect that that author wrote her books that she was posting online that was Twilight fanfiction, and that it got enough of a readership that she then made it its own thing, and then Random House picked it up, and then there are movies, and now she has millions of dollars. So it's really hard to, and really disingenuous, to run down fanfiction when there are such successes.
Yeah, I suppose I can respect that too. Hey, the internet!
I love the internet!
Now, you're a published writer. What are some of the differences between, and some of the advantages and disadvantages of actually publishing your works versus self-publishing?
A lot of it has to do with personal taste. There are stories that I've published on my blog, which does count as publishing, whether I've made money from it, whether people have even read it or not, because that does count as first publishing rights.
Okay.
And on one hand, that's really good because it gets readership. On the other hand, there aren't a lot of things you could do with stories like that you just set loose in the ether if you want to then send them to a magazine or put them, if you want to sell them to somebody, they don't want them because you've already published it, essentially.
That makes sense.
But if that's all you want to do, if you say, I want to maintain complete control of my stories, I will put them here, I will put them here, I will self-publish on Amazon, I'll go on Smashwords, that's fine. That's really cool. A lot of people build empires. They buy their own ISBNs, they build their own book covers, which is not something I have a knack for.
Well, I happen to know an artist.
Do you? Well, that's convenient. Because that's the kind of thing I need to do if I self-publish the werewolf books that I mentioned in the previous episode. But traditional publishing is also really good, because that way you have a literary agent who knows the market and knows the laws and knows what contracts mean, and that's somebody who will always be in your corner. So it's what you need for yourself.
Sometimes that's what you need as an advocate.
Yes.
We are about out of time. If you would like to promote your blog one more time.
Okay, you could find my blog at authorizedmusin.blogspot.com, and I'm also on Twitter at authorizedmusin. That's without the GS.
Okay. I will be sure to put a link in the show notes for you.
Thank you.
All right, and I want to thank you for coming back and appearing on my podcast once again. I hope to have you back again.
I hope you invite me back again.
All right. Please stay tuned for the credits.
Thanks for listening to the Art and Oddities podcast with A.M. Hall. That's our show for today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go through the grueling task of leaving us a review on whatever platform you're using to listen. I have a new and improved URL to the iTunes page. It's tiny.cc/amhall. Or just Google Art and Oddities Podcast for the player of your choice. The production of this podcast has been provided by Reverend Panic Evlan Bedlam, and without her it would not exist. As stated in today's show intro, we are hoping to upgrade our microphones and other sound equipment. You can help us do that by becoming a patron at patreon.com/panicbedlam. That's PANIKBEDLAM. Evie has also done me the honor of designing some t-shirts for the podcast. Just search for Panic Bedlam on redbubble.com. Links to the Redbubble page and to pages where you can purchase Evie's books and tarot cards will be available in the show notes. Our theme music, Doxel Dance in Space-Time, or Belial and His Seven Wives, was composed and performed by Kion Huru Orion, or as I know him, Michael. Thanks, Michael. If you would like to contact the show with comments or suggestions, you can email us at artodditiespodcast@gmail.com. Next week, I will once again welcome back friend of the show, E.W. Motomac, and we talk about cartoons and TV through the ages. That about wraps it up. Remember, the highest form of magic is doing, and expressing yourself is art. This is A.M. Hall, signing off.